Our case tonight is a testament to how important it is for investigators to trust their instincts and not give up, even when leads go cold for years. Anthony Lennon had a criminal history of possessing child material, and when serious prison time seemed certain for him, Anthony allegedly staged his own kidnapping and went on the run. Hi, I'm your host, Katie Ring, and I want to welcome you to Night Watch. If you're into true crime, real-time courtroom drama, and late-night deep dives, you're in the right place. Subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Spotify. We have new episodes every weeknight.
A convicted child sex offender has been captured after spending 13 years on the run.
Lennon escaped his arrest for possessing child involving babies. They say he was able to run after he got probation the first time he was caught.
Law enforcement says Lennon has been hiding since 2012, where detectives say he faked his own death at a Super 8 motel where he worked.
This episode discusses active criminal cases and breaking news. The information we share is based on what's publicly available at the time of recording and may change as new evidence comes to light. We aim to inform, not to decide guilt or innocence. So everyone mentioned is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. In 2008, Anthony Lennon was charged in Oklahoma on 5 counts of aggravated child. He pleaded guilty in 2010 and received a 20-year suspended sentence with probation. By 2011, he violated probation and was soon charged with 8 new counts of possession of child. A warrant was issued for his arrest, but days later, Anthony disappeared. Police investigated a crime scene at Anthony's place of work, which on the surface looked like the wanted man had been kidnapped. But pretty soon, authorities determined that Anthony had staged the whole thing, and he was now on the run. Years went by without any real sign of Anthony, but finally, in October 2025, authorities tracked him down. After months of surveillance, Anthony was finally arrested. However, as of this recording, he won't admit that he actually is Anthony Lennon. But the authorities are positive they have their man. And Anthony Lennon's criminal history goes back a long time, over 15 years. Let's dive in. It all started in Norman, the 3rd largest city in Oklahoma. Norman is best known for being the home of the University of Oklahoma, a massive, vibrant school in the heart of the state, with over 30,000 students. In 2008, 27-year-old Anthony Michael Lennon was one of those students. The school hasn't revealed any information beyond the fact that someone with the name was enrolled in the school. But one thing's for sure. In his free time, Anthony was doing some horrible things, which one of his friends discovered one day when Anthony let him use his computer. Much to Anthony's dismay, that friend came across something he never, ever wanted to see: graphic and violent child imagery. Thankfully, his friend did the right thing and immediately reported it to the Norman Police Department. Authorities promptly investigated and confirmed that there were 50 gigabytes of material on Anthony's computer. Anthony was charged with 5 counts of aggravated child. In Oklahoma, a single count of child is considered aggravated when it refers to 100 or more images. Court proceedings dragged out for a while after Anthony was initially charged, but in 2010, Anthony made a blind plea of guilty on all 5 counts. A blind plea means that the defendant hasn't made any sort of deal with the state regarding their sentencing, so the judge could sentence Anthony to any punishment, up to the maximum for his crimes, which in this case was life in prison. However, Anthony only received a 20-year sentence, which ended up being suspended. Per the terms of his sentencing, Anthony would never actually have to serve that time unless he violated his probation, which to me is one of the biggest problems in our legal system, because what do you mean you're just letting a child predator back onto the street with no repercussions? But luckily, Anthony violated his probation. One of the conditions of Anthony's probation was for him to register as a sex offender, which he failed to do. And that was just the beginning. He also wasn't supposed to use a computer, but in 2011, he violated that order too. When authorities learned about this, they took steps to impose consequences. And that's when it came to light that Anthony hadn't just violated his probation, he had committed another major offense. Surprise, surprise. He'd acquired even more child imagery. Detectives found literal piles of evidence in the form of compact discs stacked up in Anthony's home. When investigators analyzed the contents of the discs, they made the gruesome discovery that Anthony had a particular leaning towards infants and various forms of brutality. Police found even more material in Anthony's chat logs and files on his desktop computer. Anthony had once again committed a major felony, and prosecutors had more than enough evidence to charge and convict him. On Wednesday, March 7th, 2012, Anthony was charged with 8 counts of possession of child. However, officers needed to wait for an arrest warrant to be approved, so Anthony was still walking free. Soon, an arrest warrant was finally issued on a $100,000 bond. At the same time, on Monday, March 12th, 2012, Anthony showed up for work at a Super 8 motel about 10 miles south of Oklahoma City. Shortly after he arrived, someone called the police and urged them to come to the hotel. When they got there, Anthony was nowhere to be found, and officers found a plate of food in the manager's office where he would normally be. Then they noticed the cash register was left wide open. It had been completely emptied, and on top of that, office papers were scattered everywhere. At first glance, it looked like the place had been robbed, but there was much more to uncover. I feel like it's so hard to decide on the perfect gift for each of my family members, and I always find myself getting a last-minute gift. If you're the same way, you've got to check out Aura Frames. My sister got our whole family Aura Frames for Christmas last year, and it has been such an amazing gift. The frame has a function where everyone can upload photos to a shared album, and it will show up on everyone's frame in the rotation of pictures. And since I'm a brand new auntie, it has been fun to be able to watch my nephew and niece grow up. I was just laughing with my sister-in-law when a picture of my nephew as a newborn came up, and she said, "It's funny because looking back on it, we thought he was so cute at the time, but now he looks like an alien." You can also preload photos before it ships, so they open it already filled with memories, and keep adding new ones anytime from anywhere. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code CRIMEHOUSE at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code CRIMEHOUSE. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. On March 12th, 2012, police in Oklahoma responded to a call at a Super 8 motel where Anthony Lennon worked. He was supposed to be working at the time, but when they got there, there was no sign of him. At first, it looked like a robbery had occurred, but as they kept looking around the property, officers noticed deep red footprints that led towards an ice machine. When they traced the footprints back to the source, they discovered a large pool of blood at the bottom of a staircase. And near the puddle underneath the bottom stair rail was Anthony's employee badge. It was lying face up, so Anthony's name was immediately visible, and it looked as though it had fallen off in the midst of a struggle. As officers continued their search of the premises, they also found buttons from Anthony's shirt and one of his shoes. But they noticed something else too. All of these items seemed carefully placed, like they were left behind intentionally. That's when they started to wonder if Anthony had staged the scene to make it look like he was kidnapped before going on the run. You'll remember Anthony was facing a $100,000 warrant for his arrest. So it's possible he knew he wouldn't be able to pay, and he decided to flee instead. Despite their suspicions, detectives wanted to be on the safe side, so they launched an investigation into a robbery and possible kidnapping. Soon, the blood was confirmed to be Anthony's, which only painted a more bizarre picture for the investigators, who thought if Anthony had staged the scene to look like a kidnapping, it would have taken a lot of effort to drain that much blood of his own. However, this didn't convince the detectives that Anthony was actually kidnapped. If anything, it made them realize that he was not only on the loose, but he was extremely unhinged. So within hours of responding to the initial call, detectives from the Moore Police Department called in the U.S. Marshals Service for additional help with the case. A quick aside here to get into what it means to bring in the Marshals, because it's an agency with a very specific role. They were formed as the enforcement arm of the federal court system, which means that along with doing things like protecting courthouses and judges, the Marshals can also be deployed to capture fugitives who are trying to escape federal charges. People like Anthony Lennon. Once they were on the case, the Marshals quickly sent word to border security so it would be flagged if Anthony tried to leave the country. As authorities started looking into Anthony's recent activity, they discovered that the day before he disappeared, he'd gone to the bank and emptied out his entire account. From there, investigators spoke to employees at the bank, who said that when Anthony made the withdrawal, he told them that he was in trouble with the law. This solidified investigators' belief that he'd fled. However, days went on with no new information. Then days turned to weeks, which turned to months, and then to years. Investigators felt that a big reason Anthony was able to stay off the grid was his extensive technical knowledge. He held a master's degree in computer science, and at the time of his disappearance, he was working towards a doctorate. So he likely could have figured out how to delete records of himself or even doctor false records. Anthony Lennon had basically dropped off the face of the earth. But neither the Moore Police Department nor the U.S. Marshals Service ever gave up on the search for him. If their theories were right and he was still out there, they were afraid he would victimize innocent children. Eventually, the U.S. Marshals Regional Fugitive Task Force took over the majority of the investigation, and they continued searching for Anthony for 13 years. During that time, they executed over 100 search warrants and conducted extensive interviews. They traveled to different states, including Tennessee, Texas, and Nevada, always maintaining hope that they could solve the case despite so many dead ends. Finally, in 2020, agents turned up a new but small lead. In February of that year, they were tracking Anthony's online activity when they noticed something on his Amazon account from North Carolina. A phone charger was placed in his shopping cart. Even though it didn't prove much, it at least indicated that Anthony was still in the U.S. Investigators didn't turn up anything for 2 more years after that. Then in 2022, attendees at an annual anime convention outside of Dallas, Texas, reported that they had seen Anthony. In July of 2025, the Oklahoma Attorney General's office added Anthony to their 10 most wanted list. The program was started in September of 2024 to bring publicity to high-profile cases and create more opportunities for the public to help provide information on dangerous fugitives. Since the program was launched, 15 people accused of crimes like murder, drug trafficking, and rape have been successfully apprehended. Now Anthony Lennon was on that list, and the U.S. Marshals were following yet another lead. Authorities haven't revealed how they discovered this lead, but they started eyeing a man named Justin Tyler Phillips. Justin lived in the small town of Canton, New York, and in the fall of 2024, he had enrolled at the State University of New York at Canton. He lived off campus while pursuing an associate's degree in engineering science. Justin got excellent grades and hoped to transfer to either MIT or nearby Clarkson University. Between classes, he worked the front desk at the Holiday Inn Express. To those who knew Justin, it seemed like he was working hard towards his future. However, U.S. Marshals had a different theory about him. They believed he was actually Anthony Lennon. By the summer of 2025, federal authorities had located a man in New York going by the name of Justin Phillips, who they believed was actually Anthony Lennon, and that he'd been living freely out in the open for years. No one at his school or the Holiday Inn had any clue who he was, because the man by the name of Justin Phillips had provided them with an official state ID and birth certificate. It was a well-played scheme on Anthony's part, but now the jig was up. Once the U.S. Marshals had enough evidence that Justin really was Anthony, they called in one of the original investigators on the case, Detective Jason Landrum, who quickly booked a flight to New York. Detective Landrum and other investigators stayed about an hour outside of Canton as a precaution. There were a lot of them, and they worried that such a large number of detectives would be noticed in a small town. If Anthony caught wind, he might get away again. On Thursday, October 30th, 2025, surveillance teams trailed 44-year-old Anthony. When he left his residence that day, he headed to campus. Then, after class, Anthony headed to his neighborhood grocery store. There, investigators gathered outside and waited for the right moment to move in. And once they had Anthony in a secure part of the store, they surrounded him. Anthony Lennon was finally in custody. The people who'd gotten to know him in Canton were shocked. They only knew Justin as a straight-A student whose behavior never set off any alarm bells. But behind that unassuming mask, there was a man with an extremely dark past. Later, fingerprint analysis confirmed that it was really Anthony. Once they got the confirmation, Detective Landrum called his colleagues back in Oklahoma to share the news. The very next day, Anthony was banned from campus. But that was the least of his problems. As of this recording, Anthony is in federal custody in Syracuse, New York. Despite the fingerprint evidence of his true identity, Anthony is sticking to the name Justin Phillips and swears he's not really Anthony Lennon. His attorney will only refer to him as a man alleged to be Anthony Lennon. She also won't comment on the charges of probation violation or possession of child material. As of this recording, the prosecution is trying to definitively prove his identity. Authorities are also seeking to have Anthony return to Oklahoma. Once he's there, he will face the 8 counts of possession of child that he was charged with in 2012 in the Cleveland County Court. As soon as it was confirmed that Anthony left Oklahoma, the Cleveland County District Attorney's Office obtained a federal warrant to arrest him for failing to register as a sex offender and violating his probation. In addition to the charges Anthony will face in Oklahoma, New York authorities are obtaining search warrants for any crimes that could have been committed while he was living in their state. They're currently looking into digital evidence and records of past residences. Anthony may have thought he could outsmart authorities, but clearly his own hubris got the better of him. Now he'll have to own up to all of his wrongdoing. And as Moore Police Chief Todd Gibson said after Anthony's arrest, "I would like to point out to anyone that seeks to harm or exploit children, you need to know this: we will not stop, we will not lose focus, and no matter how long it takes or how far you run, we will come for you." As always, we'll be sure to keep you up to date on any progress in this investigation. What did you think of tonight's case? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments. See you next time. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Crime House Daily and follow us on social media at Crimehouse 24/7 for real-time updates, because the pursuit of justice never stops.